Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Naruto Left But Hinata Is Confused, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto stared into Hinata's face, his mind blank with fear. Nervously he began rubbing the back of his head with his free hand and smiling widely. Oh, why you're awake, Hinata. I mean you're okay. I was just checking in on you. Since why you're fine, I'll just be leaving now. Naruto let Hinata's hand fall as he clumsily backed out of the dimly lit hospital room. Hinata impassively watched as the young man before her stumbled over the back leg of the hospital chair and tried to ungracefully regain his composure as he backed out of the room, his hand still glued behind his and loud smile still plastered on his face. The moment he reached the doorway and turned to make his escape down the hall, he was stopped by a tiny voice. Please, don't go. Hinata squeaked. She felt the heat rise to her face and her chest fill with conflicting emotions, embarrassment, yearning, fright. The most prominent feeling was the familiar pulling on her heart. It bullied its way to the forefront, pushing aside any other emotions that dared to stand in its way, causing them to fade in the background. Hinata grabbed for her lace and for a moment she regretted her interference in the blonde man's departure. What? Naruto turned around to face her, his stunned blue eyes piercing through her own lavender ones. I need to speak with you. She stammered, the confusion inside her growing as memories from the forest raced through her mind. A deep pain resonated inside her at thought of the words she had so ungraciously uttered, and for some reason she just couldn't shake Kiba from her mind. Okay. Naruto hesitantly agreed. He could feel the perspiration forming upon the top of his sunny head and he nervously twiddled his thumbs as he made his way back inside the stuffy little room. As he took the seat next to the hospital bed once more, he was thankful for the moon and the vast amount of darkness it allowed. Hinata's eyes could not make out his own terrified features, but as she lifted her eyes to his, he was taken aback at the way they seemed to shine in the dark shadows of the room. Sakura's eyes flashed through his mind and Naruto felt a small twinge in his heart, as if he were betraying her in some way. He thought about the way her emerald green eyes had always sparkled majestically in the rays of the sun and always looked so alive. He could clearly read every expression, every thought that touched the edges of her beautiful irises, but at night, her eyes lost all trace of the lively vigor that resonated from them during the day, but there was something different, something more enchanting about Hinata's crystal-like orbs. He stared deeper into the entrancing vastness of her white lavender eyes, studying the way he could see everything and nothing at the same time. The way the warm light called him in from the dark, dispelling any doubt, without answering any questions. He could stay there forever, just staring at those eyes, the ones that seemed so familiar, and yet so new. Naruto was so lost in thought, he didn't even notice the deep crimson that now graced Hinata's usually pale cheeks. She squirmed uncomfortably under the scrutiny of his intense gaze and unceremoniously tore her eyes away. Naruto. She quietly began as she intently stared down at the flower she was twirling in her hand. I wanted to apologize to you about the way I behaved in the woods. I didn't really mean any of those hurtful things I had said. I know that you're a kind and caring person. Why, you're one of the most unselfish people know. It was just that I was so shaken up. Hinata began to tremble as she choked on her words. Naruto wrapped his tense arms around the small girl's shoulders and pulled her into his chest. SSHH, he said as he lovingly patted her on the back. It's okay, I understand. We were all pretty shaken up that night, he said soothingly as Sakura's face ran through his mind once again, accompanied by the same nagging feeling he felt before. Hinata allowed him to envelope her in his strong arms and let her head fall onto the hardness of his chest. She closed her eyes as she allowed his scent, his voice and the warmth of his body to soothe her. Her heart beat rapidly as she realized how close she was to her blonde shinobi, and almost instantly she heard a faint voice in her head whisper, I love you, as her mind returned to the dark woods and the wetness of Kiba's chest against her frozen cheek. Swiftly she pulled herself away from Naruto's comforting embrace and stared out the window. It's hot in here. she muttered as she fanned herself with her hands. Naruto followed Hinata's gaze out the window and looked up at the dark sky. His eyes automatically sorted through the millions of sparkling dots until he found the two he was looking for. As he stared up at the two magnificent lights, he gave a slight smile as he thought about Hinata's eyes. Then, he had an idea. "Hinata," Naruto whispered as he bit his lip. Instantly her glorious eyes met his, and the moment they locked he could feel his head reeling. "You wanna get out of her?" he asked with a wry smile on his face. What do you mean?" Hinata asked, a confused look on her face. "I promise I'll have you back before anyone notices we're missing," Naruto said as he scooped Hinata up into his arms, and jumped out the window without waiting for a response. Naruto ran eagerly through the barely lit streets of Konoha, allowing the cool wind to whip through Hinata's cascading black hair. He ran by building after dark building until the dirt streets opened up and gave way to huge bustling trees. Naruto slowed down, as he entered the green bushes of the circular park and didn't stop until he found a white marble bench sitting beneath the large sweeping branches of an ancient oak tree. Here Naruto finally came to a halt and gently sat Hinata down onto the inviting park bench. "Why are we here?" Hinata asked after a long moment of silence. Naruto didn't answer as he turned toward Hinata and gently picked the pink flower she was twirling out of her hand. Gently he brushed her dark hair back behind her ear and pinned the flower against the weight of her hair and her ear. Silently he sat back and admired his handiwork, as the blackness of her hair and the whiteness of her skin caused the flower to glow and made her eyes sparkle with a pink tint. At the sight of the pink coloring, Naruto pulled back, clasping his hands together as he stared at the ground. Hinata felt a small pain at the small gesture, causing her heart to reminisce to just a few days before, when Naruto returned. Hinata shook her head free of her thoughts and placed her over the flower sitting prettily against her dull features. "I picked that for you when I went missing." Naruto's voice broke through the crisp night air. Hinata's eyes opened wide at his words. A warm wave ran over her body. "What?" she asked in disbelief. "It was an apology flower, for being so wrapped up in myself and what's important to me." He took a deep breath and looked straight up at the sky. His eyes scanning it only for a second before ceasing to move at all. Hinata just watched the outline of his light spiky hair, cute nose and lips and masculine chin and then against the night sky, patiently waiting for him to speak again. "I like to stare at the sky when I'm feeling lost, when I'm feeling lonely," he confided in her. I thought that you could sit here with me, Hinata." Not for the first time, Hinata felt overwhelmed by the gesture, her fluttered in her chest and her breathing became more rapid. She had to speak, she needed to speak. "Why do you feel so lost?" Hinata forced the words out, unconsciously wiping her hands along the top of her white legs. I've just been so confused lately," Naruto said as he continued to look up at the stars. Kiba's face crossed Hinata's mind and she desperately wanted to reach out for Naruto's rough hands. Everyone is confused," Hinata mustered. No one truly knows what they want or need to do. "Why you are not alone in that, Naruto?" Naruto continued to gaze at the two shining stars as he thought about Hinata's words. "Do you see those two stars?" he asked. Hinata's eyes followed the line his finger created and held her breath as the beauty of the double lights hit her. Naruto gave her a satisfied smile as he watched her reaction. "They are beautiful, aren't they? I love to search for them, to find them out. They are like an old friend to me. The first time I saw them, they were unimpressive, in fact I didn't even notice them. Then, when I was gone for 3 years, someone pointed them out to me and he told me that he always looks for them when he is lonely. That was the first time I had ever truly given them a second look, even though they had always been there, and since then I always find myself searching them out. It's just like me though, not seeing what's in front of me and needing someone else to point it out to me, and now every time I gaze at them, they become more beautiful to me." Hinata blushed as Naruto looked at her as he spoke the last words. "I have to make a decision." Naruto urgently shot out the words, causing Hinata to jump. "In order to save Sakura, Sasuke wants me to come after him alone, so I can give him the Kyuubi's power, but if I do that, then I may be putting Konoha in danger, but I will be pointlessly risking the lives of our comrades." Hinata watched Naruto run a heavy hand through his thick hair, as all her thoughts escaped her mind. Naruto," Hinata managed. "Why you must do what you think is right. NN1 can make the decision for you. Hinata quickly bit her lip as Naruto's body slumped over the bench at her words. B but, she added, if it makes you feel any b better, it think you should wait, until the rest of our friends can join you. It would make me feel better knowing you were safe. Hinata quickly looked away as Naruto's eyes lit up. I should wait. I should just be patient, our friends are trained ninja, they can take care of themselves. He turned to Hinata and gave her a warm hug. Thanks Hinata, you have no idea how long I've been agonizing over that decision. Then as if he realized what he was doing, he quickly jumped back and sheepishly looked at the ground. Hinata felt her cheeks burn as her confused thought tore through her mind. Well, it's getting late, Naruto said as he stared up at the sky. We should be heading back. Once again Hinata found herself wrapped up in the arms of her shinobi, as he quickly made his way back through the dark streets to the hospital. Once inside the room, Naruto laid Hinata carefully across the hospital bed and tenderly pulled the wool blankets over her peat form. As he finished pulling the sheets to her shoulders, his blue eyes locked on her pearl irises and he lingered over her face longer than he should have, with an expression Hinata had never seen before. Almost as if he realized what he was doing, Naruto shook himself free from the spell and smiled down at her. Friends, right? He asked. Friends, Hinata repeated, a small hint of sadness within her voice. Then Naruto casually bent down and pressed his warm lips against her cool forehead and disappeared down the hall before Hinata could utter another word. Hinata rolled over in her bed, emotions running rampant within her chest. Naruto had left her breathless as he vanished out the door and half of her was still warm and tingling all over from the night's events, but at the same time she felt sick and she couldn't shake Kiba's face from her mind. Hinata lay awake in her bed, one hand over her silver heart and the other over clutching the flower still firmly tucked behind her ear. She stayed like this, allowing the dual personalities within her to collide, leaving her more listless and confused than she had been before, until sleep finally came to claim her. Down the hall, Naruto sat in his hospital bed, his head spinning from the events of the night. He had kissed her forehead and told her they were just friends, but he wasn't entirely sure he still felt that way anymore in Sakura. He had always waited for, he would always wait for her, but he had told Hinata that he would stay and wait to leave again for her. Naruto lay his head down on his white fluffy pillow, his entire world spinning and no answers in sight. Naruto restlessly tossed and turned, desperately waiting for sleep's sweet release, but for some reason his pillow wasn't fluffy enough and the bed was becoming harder by the second. To make it worse, his mind wouldn't calm down. His thoughts seemed to become louder and more pronounced with every failed attempt he made to fall into the rejuvenating cycle of slumber. No matter how much he tried, he couldn't quit thinking about her. His Sakura was still missing and yet, he couldn't push the dark-haired girl from his mind. Every glance, every blush, every touch she had given him that night replayed in his mind and lingered over his fingertips. His lips. He had told her he would wait to go after Sasuke and Sakura and now he couldn't sleep. What was happening to him? He would never have deserted Sakura so easily before, but for some reason he couldn't find a reason to resist the dark-haired girl when she had pleaded for him to wait and rescue the missing girl with the others. At the time, he had been content with his decision and his promise, but now the uneasiness had crept in and his stomach wound tighter by the minute, and yet, despite all of this, he just wanted to see her again. Then he saw it, the face of the pink-haired green-eyed girl he had loved for so long and he felt a slight twinge radiate through his heart, then, just as quickly, it was gone. Naruto inhaled deeply and sunk deeper into the pillow, his arm raised above his head as he stared out the hospital window, the midnight sky reflecting his every thought. He would see her tomorrow, she'd be able to calm his nerves. She was his friend after all. His friend. Hinata woke early, her hands still clutching her lace and the flower. Meticulously she examined the dim hospital room, lit by the light pink and orange hues breaking up the monotony of the night sky. The sun hadn't risen quite yet and it would be a while before she would have visitors again. Quietly she lay in her plain hospital bed, snuggling into the warmth her body had created between the blankets. Absently she allowed her eyes to roam over the tiled ceiling and down the blank walls, as the weight on her grew heavier and heavier. Slowly her mind began wandering and she could picture her silver locket perfectly in her mind. Hinata cringed at the thought of the heavy object and desperately tried to push it from her thoughts, but it stubbornly refused to be ignored. Reluctantly, Hinata relinquished any resistance and allowed the enlace to overtake her mind, along with the overwhelming emotions it evoked. She closed her eyes as she thought about the day Naruto had left. She had been so upset, and yet Kiba was the one who had been there for her. The first year he was gone, she had been stuck in a hazy cloud. Everything moved around her, as her world stood still. It was almost surreal, and he had been there, to challenge her, to hug her, to just make her laugh. He had become a permanent fixture in her garden as well. One that she had come to take for granted. She saw him in the same light as she saw all of the wonderful flowers around her, beautiful and charming, and always there when she needed them. They were unchanging and reliable, just like her friend. When Naruto had finally returned, he was the one to tell her. He had made sure he was. She had just thought he wanted to share in the joy of his best friend, but now, how could she have missed it? How could she have not seen what should have been so clear to her? The one person who could understand him the most. Hinata felt the heaviness transcend from the locket and into the depths of her heart, as those three words echoed through her mind once more. She bit her lip as her emotions began suffocating her fragile heart, and her hand automatically reached for the pink flower still stuck in her hair. Carefully she pulled it out and stared longingly into the magenta petals as she twirled its long stem in her hand, causing the pink of the flower to blur together, creating a parasol effect. Hinata Street USD. The flower, long after the initial beauty had faded away. The color now was more abrasive and obnoxious than it had been before, but somehow the flower maintained a soft and gentle glow, just like the person who had given it to her. Hinata's lips parted into a small smile at the thought of Naruto gently pulling her hair back and placing the impeccable flower behind her ear. She blushed furiously as she thought about the intensity she had seen in his blue eyes as he held the beautiful flower in the palms of his rough hands, like he was trying to communicate some deep secret into its very being. Then Hinata remembered how he had looked when he turned to face her with the same intense blue eyes, and a shudder ran through her spine, not from the chill of the morning light, but from the warmth she had felt when he had looked at her. The way she had felt was inexplicable, and she would never forget the way his hands gently and lovingly placed the flower in her hair. Of course, there was also the moment they had shared before he had left. Hinata closed her eyes as she relived the few minutes before Naruto had bent down and tenderly kissed her forehead. She was uncertain, but she could have sworn that he had hovered over her lips a moment longer than he should have. Hinata allowed her thoughts to overtake her senses, and soon she was lightheaded and dizzy. Suddenly she felt her common sense start to take over, instantly bringing down from her euphoric high. Naruto had probably been thinking about Sakura. After all, she was the only girl he had really talked about with her last night. She was only setting herself up to fall, and when she did, who would be there to clean up the mess? Kiba. Hinata couldn't deny it. The feelings that his face started to evoke inside her weren't entirely platonic, but she didn't want to give up Naruto, not after last night. She wasn't sure, but for the first time she had hoped that she could become something more than just his friend. Still, she couldn't help feeling torn. How could she trade her happiness for his? Could I be happy with him? She silently wondered. Hinata. Hey Hinata. A familiar voice whispered. Hinata jumped in her bed, and opened her mouth to scream as a strong hand circled around the back of her head and covered her mouth. The next thing she knew, she was looking into the smiling face of very cheery blonde-hair shinobi. Shush. It's just me. I was wondering if you were hungry. I thought we could eat together. He nervously laughed. Hinata continued to just stare up at the sunny-haired boy in front of her. Even though hints of darkness still lingered within the room, she could still clearly see the nervous smile he held in anticipation of her answer, fall with every silent passing moment. After waiting a while with no answer, Naruto finally relinquished his hand from over her mouth and hung his head in defeat. That's okay, I understand, he said as he began to slowly saunter away. Wide-eyed, Hinata practically fell from her hospital bed as she frantically yelled in a hushed tone. Yes, Naruto. I would like that very much. Naruto froze where he was. Hinata watched as her heart began to hammer frantically within her chest, unsure of what he was going to do or say next, his back the only visible thing to her in the dark room. That's great, I'll sneak down into the kitchen and bring us some food. I'll be back soon, he said enthusiastically as he hurried out the door, leaving Hinata alone in her dim hospital room once more. Hinata fell back into her pillows, her fingers already together, turning around one over the other. What had she just done? Wasn't she already confused enough? Why would she agree to this? Hinata looked down at her arms and suddenly became embarrassed by the deep burns and abrasions that littered her milky skin. Quickly she cocooned herself in the white bedsheets, hoping Naruto hadn't noticed. Maybe he already had, she thought. Maybe that's why had been so nice to her last night and why he was getting her breakfast this morning. She silently cursed herself for not knowing better. She had convinced herself that he might actually have feelings for her, but the truth was he would never forget Sakura and now she wouldn't know how to face him, or Kiba. Hinata stared out the window, watching the pink disappear from the sky as the sun began to emerge over the peak of the mountain top, casting a light blue around its shimmering orange light. Gradually her dark room began to lighten up and her eyes began to close. Hinata, wake up, I'm here. A light voice gently nudged Hinata's consciousness back into the world of the living and she sleepily opened her eyes. Instead of the hypnotizing blue eyes she had expected to see, Hinata's sleepy eyes were met with a pair of dark brown ones. Kiba. Hinata forced herself up and immediately looked out the window. The sun was completely out now and she could see people moving in the street below her window. How long have I been asleep? What time is it? It's about 8 in the morning, Hinata. Kiba stared at his friend, a look of confusion and worry pasted on his handsome face. Why? Hinata shrugged off his question, uncertain of how to answer it, as she uncomfortably readjusted herself under her covers. When she moved her right hand, she felt something crinkle under the pressure. Kiba, could you get me some water? I'm really thirsty and my pitcher is empty. She said as she pointed to the light blue container sitting on the tray at the end of her bed. Obediently Kiba picked up the pitcher and took it down to the nurse's station. Hinata watched until he walked out the door, then she quickly pulled out the small piece of paper that had been placed in her hand. The writing was small and looked as if it had been written in haste. Quickly she scanned the page, while she waited for Kiba to return. Hinata, you looked so peaceful I didn't want to wake you. Don't worry, we'll still have breakfast together, I'll be back later. Naruto. Hinata swiftly folded the parchment up and stuffed down the side of the bed as Kiba returned. Shouldn't you be lying down? Kiba's concerned voice echoed through the room. I don't, I'm fine, Kiba. Hinata finally answered, her senses frazzled by his presence. Hinata kept her eyes down, not daring to look into her friend's longing brown ones again. Would you like some water at least? Kiba asked, already pouring her some in the small matching hospital cup. Sure. Hinata fidgeted nervously as she waited for him to hand her the blue cup. Kiba smiled gently at his teammate, exposing the tips of his fangs as he handed her the drink. Hinata took it, her limbs shaking furiously as she attempted to take a sip, but only managed to splash a little on her lips. Kiba lovingly watched his friend, his eyes scanning every inch of her scarred and healing body. Hinata shifted uncomfortably under his kind gaze, her mind whirling out of control. She could feel his eyes on her and she automatically reached for it. Don't, it's bleeding, he said as he reached for rag and some disinfectant from the same tray the water pitcher rested on. Hinata gently touched the open wound on her and stared at her bloody hand. He was right, one of her burns had opened up and from the looks of it, was bleeding pretty badly. Closing her eyes, Hinata waited for Kiba's warm touch. She didn't wait for long, soon she could feel his smooth hands against the side of her as he carefully cleaned up the blood pooling in her wound. Then suddenly, she felt his hot breath upon her skin. Hinata's heart began pounding rapidly deep within her chest and her breathing became labored as every hair on her body began to tingle and stand upright. You know, I came as soon I could when I found out you were awake. Kiba whispered, his words tickling her sensitive skin. Hun. Was the only thing she could manage. I wanted to tell you something, before it's too late. He urgently continued. Hinata's eyes sprung open, desperate to keep him from what he was about to do. She wasn't ready for this, she couldn't handle this. Kiba, please don't. I like you, Hinata. There was a sudden crashing sound and Hinata turned to look Kiba in the eyes. There she found an inviting warmth and a longing she was unsure she could return, but desperately wanted to. At the same time, she saw a blonde streak disappear down the hall. Naruto. Kiba. I. Hinata felt the intensity of all her thoughts and the confusion of all her emotions well up inside of her at once. I like you too, really I do, but, I don't know, I'm so confused. Hinata began to weep wildly as Kiba stared at her in amazement. Before he could answer back, nurses came running down the hall as the intercom bellowed through the hospital. This is a red alert, I repeat this is a red alert. Hinata frantically watched as the nurses headed in the direction of his room. In the sea of white and black hair, Hinata spotted a blonde glimmer of hope. Ino, she yelled as she leapt out bed and ran to the door, leaving Kiba to stare in astonishment. Ino, who is it? Hinata hollered after her desperately. Ino quickly made her way back to her dark-haired friend, her blue eyes full of panic. It's Naruto, she confided. He escaped. Hinata watched as the blonde girl returned to her place within the sea of nurses. As Hinata sadly turned to re-enter her room, she froze for a moment, her eyes locked on the two light blue plate lying on the ground. Swiftly she made her way across the room and grabbed Kiba by the arm. We have to go after him, he's gone after Sakura and Sasuke on his own. She yelled frantically. You can't go anywhere not like that. He pointed to the burn marks all over her body. We can't just let him go out there alone, he could be killed if he goes by himself. Hinata watched as the gentleness melted from her friend's eyes and was replaced by a blackness she had never seen before, then, just as quickly the same soft eyes were staring at her. Then I will go, he decided. No, you can't go alone either. Kiba eyed his friend before answering. I have a Kamaru, I won't be alone. No, Hinata insisted. Kiba rolled his eyes. I'll get Shino too. There is no time for that, we must go after him now and I'm going with you whether you like it or not. Kiba gave Hinata a hard look. You can't protect me forever. She pushed, the insistence in her eyes hardening. Kiba glared at her and then finally sighed in defeat. Okay, then how do you want to do this? You'll leave out the front on your own, but first you'll find Ino and tell her to send Shino after us, along with anyone Lady Tsunade thinks will be of any assistance. Then you will meet me below this window. I should have plenty of time to find him with my Byakugan between now and then. Kiba stared at his friend in disbelief, before silently stalking away. Hinata walked over to her door and quietly closed it, making sure it was locked before releasing the handle. Then she turned and stared at the emptiness of her white room and took in a deep breath before proceeding to take her clothes from the inside of the mini dresser. She was relieved when she found her normal ninja gear, her standard purple overcoat with blue leggings, and not the thrashed pink dress she had been wearing the night she had been omitted. Thank you, Kurenai, she whispered as she slipped into her fresh clothing and discarded the hospital gown. Then she carefully opened the window and jumped down. The moment her feet touched the ground, she activated her Byakugan and quickly began to survey the area. A small smile spread across her face as she spotted a distant chakra running deep into the woods. Just as I suspected, she thought, as she waited for her teammate to arrive, never losing sight of her target. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.